Many of you know the Naco Heritage Alliance. The mission of the Naco Heritage Alliance is to create a destination here at Camp Naco with 3 pillars. One is to create a destination that honors the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers in the American Southwest. Okay, remember there's going to be equity for all of you. The second pillar is to advance arts and culture of the Arizona borderlands. And third, equally important, is to have Camp Naco be a destination for the residents of the community and a community resource for the community of Naco, Arizona. So it's my honor this morning to be your MC for the program, for the ceremony. And I need to acknowledge that this is a partnership between the City of Bisbee, the Naco Heritage Alliance, the Southwest Association of Buffalo Soldiers,
That's right, yeah!
as well as a number of Buffalo Soldier organizations and individuals who are all listed in your program. So if you wanted to get a list of them, they're right here in your program. Before we get started, I would like to recognize the public officials in the audience. So if you could, please raise your hand or stand up. We'd like to acknowledge you.
Present arms.
I would now like to ask SWAP Chaplain Andre Sexton to the podium to lead the invocation. I haven't seen him this morning. Is he arrived? Oh, there he is.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. What a great day. Yeah. I'll try not to be too churchy, but I am a chaplain. My God is a God of restoration, so it's an honor to be here today to see what He's given us the wisdom to do. Let's put our hands to work and do it. Let us pray. Eternal and all-wise God, author and creator of the universe, you who are unseen, but we know that you're looking and hearing what we are saying and doing. We ask your wisdom upon all of our civic leaders today. We ask your wisdom upon every organization that will put their hand to this plow. God, that you would push us forward with unity and grace, that we would restore what could have been lost, but by the grace of God, you've given us what we need to push forward. And we thank you for all that have gathered today. God, give us your protection from the heat. Give us the protection from anything that was set out to hurt us. But more than that, give us the unity of spirit to get this done. In your precious name we pray. Amen?
Amen. Amen.
So at this time, go ahead and take your Bibles. Oh, no, that's another audience.
Thank you, Chaplain. So you know that today we are honoring the National Buffalo Soldier Day, which was actually on July 28th, and also the 75th anniversary of the executive order ending segregation in the armed forces, which was on July 26th. But we also want to recognize that July was the 75th anniversary of Indigenous people in Arizona earning the right to vote. We know that Camp Naco has a multi-layered history that includes the Buffalo Soldiers, the history of border protection, the mining of railroads, and of Spanish exploration in this region. But there is also a history of Indigenous people who occupied this land for millennia. As such, the Naco Heritage Alliance would like to respectfully acknowledge that Camp Naco resides on the ancestral lands of Indigenous people, including the Subaipuri, the Opata, and the Chiricahua Apache. We as an organization are committed to building sustainable relationships with the affiliated descendant tribes of the Camp Naco site through educational and community outreach programming to ensure their history is honored and not forgotten. Thank you. Now, if I could ask Demetria to join me here at the podium. Today, we're honoring two champions of Camp Naco who have recently passed away, J.C. Mutchler and Tom Stoney. Both of their profiles are in your program, and I encourage you to take a look at them. But let me say, before Demetria says a couple of words, for J.C. Mutchler, he was the reason that I came here in 2007. He was a colleague at the University of Arizona, and he was dedicated to the preservation of this place and of the Buffalo Soldiers. We will miss him dearly. Demetria?
Today we give honor and respect to our soldier at rest. Sergeant First Class Retired Thomas R. Stoney Sr., December 28, 1934, July 3, 2023. Tom enlisted in the United States Army in 1952 for 3 years. By December of 1952, he served in combat in Korea during the Korean War. Arriving in Korea on 17 December 1952, 11 days before he turned 18 years old. He served in Korea from December 1952 to April 1954 and served in Vietnam during the Vietnam War 1966 to 1967 and was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for Gallantry under fire by hostile forces. Tom also served in Germany 2 tours, in Ethiopia, Africa during his military career. He retired from the Army in August 1976 with over 22 years of service. Tom served as the president of the Southwest Association of Buffalo Soldiers, SWABS Incorporated, from 2001 to 2007. He spearheaded the drive to save the Fort Huachuca's historic Mountain View Colored Officers Club from demolition and was a strong advocate for the preservation of Camp Naco. Rest.
We would now like to honor Sergeant First Class Stoney with the playing of taps. So please rise and face the colors. Please be seated. I'd now like to invite to the podium Robert Guerrero from the office of Senator Mark Kelly, then followed by Bisbee Mayor Ken Budge for the delivery of official proclamations.
Good morning. It's a real honor for me to be here on behalf of Senator Kelly. On a personal note, my family was from Don Louis up the street here near Bisbee, and so my family is from this region as well. And I just have to say my grandfather crossed the border around 1917, so it was Buffalo Soldiers that helped keep this area safe when Mexico was passing through a time of unrest. So thank you on behalf of our family. So the letter from Senator Kelly reads, "Dear members of the Naco Heritage Alliance, thank you for the invitation to join you at the celebration of National Buffalo Soldiers Day. It is an honor to help commemorate the 75th anniversary of Executive Order 9981, which desegregated the armed forces and served as a crucial step forward in our nation's ongoing fight for equality. The faithful service and sacrifice of Buffalo soldiers in the early years of Arizona's statehood is an important part of American history. Serving in the face of fierce combat and extreme discrimination, the Buffalo soldiers left a legacy of heroism and honor. Your mission to partner with and educate communities across the nation allows for this legacy to be memorialized and celebrated. I hope you have a meaningful day of reflection and remembrance. My wife, Gabby Giffords, and I wish the Naco Heritage Alliance continued strength and success. Sincerely, Mark Kelly, United States Senator." Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say how proud I am to actually be a mayor of a city that was able to help bring this together. It's probably one of the most memorable things I'll remember during my mayorship for the city. This was a long time coming. There's so many people that have been involved in this for so many years that it truly is a testament to fortitude. And when I think of fortitude, I think of the Buffalo Soldiers and the testament of the courage and the determination of them in the face of adversity. And their legacy of service and sacrifice is the source of pride for all Americans and should never be forgotten. So in that stint, I had this proclamation drawn up, and excuse me, I have to put on my readers. That's what age does for you. Whereas African Americans have fought with distinction in all of this country's military engagements, and whereas on July 28, 1866, Congress established a peacetime army founding 6 new African American units, the 9th and 10th Cavalry, and the 38th, 39th, 40th, and 41st Infantry. And later on, the 38th and 41st were reorganized into the 25th Infantry, and the 39th and 40th were reorganized into the 24th Infantry. This totaled over 180,000 African American soldiers. That's quite a testament to our country. Whereas these soldiers were nicknamed the Buffalo Soldiers by the Native Americans because of their reputation for fighting fearlessly to the end of battle. And whereas the Buffalo Soldiers were responsible for escorting settlers, cattle herds, railroad crews, exploring and mapping vast areas of the Southwest, and stringing hundreds of miles of telegraph lines, helping in the expansion of the West. And whereas throughout the era of the Indian Wars, the Buffalo Soldiers were posted from Montana to the Northwest to Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona in the Southwest, making up approximately 20% of the United States cavalry troopers. Whereas the Buffalo Soldiers introduced into the Arizona Veterans Hall of Fame Medal of Honor are Corporal Isaiah Mays, 24th Infantry, class of 2021, Sarah Benjamin, Brown, 24th Infantry, class of 2015, and Sergeant William McBride, 10th Cavalry, class of 2016. And whereas it is important for the citizens of Arizona to preserve the history of the Buffalo Soldiers and commemorate the sacrifices they have made to the state and to this wonderful nation. I now let it be resolved that Ken Budge, Mayor of City of Bisbee, do hereby proclaim Friday, July 28th, 2023, to be declared as Buffalo Soldiers Day in the City of Bisbee.
All right, Demetra. I'd like to introduce Demetra Warren from SWABS again. And for the reading of the Executive Order 9981, the text of this is in your program, so I invite you to read along with Demetra.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I greet you with love and honor. And Charles here looking so fantastic. Tell you about this uniform. This is original. Go ahead.
Most of you see the blue uniform of the Buffalo Soldiers. Probably some of you today is the first time you've seen this particular uniform. This is the uniform that the Buffalo Soldiers would have worn during that period of time, 1910, 1920, when they were stationed here at Camp Naco.
Make sure there's some clarity there because the uniform that I wear is a 1890. So there's different regiments as you go forward in the Buffalo Soldier. You'll learn our history. It's really beautiful. It is really great. So we come to you today to give you some real education. Let's pray that you receive it in a good way. I don't mean to hurt no feelings, not like that. The 75th anniversary of desegregation of the U.S. Army holds significant historical and cultural importance. The desegregation of the military refers to the Executive Order 9981, signed by President Harry S. Truman on July 26, 1948, which aimed to eliminate racial discrimination in the armed forces. This order was one of President Truman's most important achievements and became a major catalyst for the civil rights movement. An African-American World War II veteran, Isaac Woodward Jr., on February 12, 1946, hours after being honorably discharged from the United States Army, he was attacked while still in uniform by South Carolina police as he was taking a bus home. The attack left Woodward completely and permanently blind. The attack and his injury sparked national outrage and roused the civil rights movement. These actions inspired Harry Truman's move to desegregate the military. On July 26, 1948, President Harry S. Truman changed the course of American history forever. Truman's Executive Order 9981 officially declared there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed forces without regard to race, color, religion, and or national origin. The desegregation of the military was a major step towards breaking down racial barriers, promoting equality in the United States. It was a significant milestone in the civil rights movement and helped pave the way for further desegregation efforts in other areas of American society. The desegregation of military was an important victory for civil rights activists such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders who had long fought against racial discrimination. It demonstrated the process that possibilities and served as a catalyst for the future advancements in civil rights legislation. The desegregation of military promoted equal opportunity and integrated within the armed forces. It allowed African American service members to serve along with their white counterparts on an equal basis, fostering camaraderie and breaking down prejudices. Celebrating the 75th anniversary of desegregation is a way to acknowledge and recognize the process made in the struggle of racial equality in the United States. It serves as a reminder of how far the country has come since that time and highlights the ongoing work needed to achieve fully equality. In summary, celebrating the 75th anniversary of the desegregation of the U.S. military honors the individuals who fought for racial equality, acknowledges the process made, and serves as a reminder of the ongoing work needed to create a more just and inclusive society. By commemorating the desegregation of the military, we can inspire the future generations to continue fighting for equality and justice. It provides an opportunity to educate younger individuals about the historic significance of the event and encourage them to work towards a more inclusive society. Executive Order 9981 is inside your program. You may follow me. It reads, establishing the President's Committee on Equality of Treatment and Opportunity in the Armed Forces. This is Executive Order 9981. Whereas it is essential that there be maintained in the armed services of the United States, the highest standards of democracy and equality of treatment and opportunity for those who serve our country's defense. Now, therefore, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the President of the United States, by the Constitution of the Statutes of the United States, and as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Services, it is hereby ordered as follows. 1. It is hereby declared by the policy of the President that there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed service without regard, race, color, religion, and national origin. This policy shall be put into effect as rapidly as possible, having due regard to the time required of the efficient and any necessary changes without impairing efficiency or morale. 2. There shall be created in the National Military Establishment an advisory committee to be known as the President's Committee on the Equality, Treatment, and Opportunity of the Armed Forces, which shall be composed of 7 members to be designated by the President. Point 3, the committee is authorized on behalf of the President to examine into rules, procedures, and practices of the armed services in order to determine in what respect such rules, procedures, practices may be altered or improved with a view to carrying out the policy of this order. The committee shall confer and advise the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Army, the Secretary of the Navy, the Secretary of the Air Force, and shall as such recommend to the President and to said secretaries as the judgment of the committee will influence of the policy thereof. Point 4. All executive departments and agencies of the federal government are authorized and directed to cooperate with the committee in its works. To flourish the committee, such information or the services of such persons as the committee may require in the performance of their duties. Point 5. When requested by the committee to do so, persons in the armed services or in the executive departments and agencies of the federal government shall testify before the committee and shall make available for those use of the committee shall such documents and other information as the committee may require. 6. The committee shall continue to exist until such time as the President shall determine its existence by executive order. Signed, Harry Truman, the White House, July 26, 1948.
Charles was just reminding me that this not only paved the way for minorities, it also paved the way for our first African-American president of the United States. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Becky Orozco and bring her up to the stage. I often refer to Becky as a spiritual godmother of Camp Naco, as she's been the fearless champion for the last 20 plus years Her official role now, however, is community coordinator for the Camp Naco project and is also a board member of the Naco Heritage Alliance. Becky.
Wow, what a journey. Thank you all for being here today, and many of you have been involved in all of these years as we've been getting to this point. So Buffalo, Camp Naco was built here because the border's right over there, and the Buffalo soldiers who served here were probably our first border patrol. It's basically 600 yards, basically one rifle shot away from the Mexican Revolution, which was raging on that side of the border starting in 1911. Some of the most significant battles of the Mexican Revolution were fought right there. And the Buffalo soldiers here who were rotating out of Fort Huachuca were the ones who carried that battle for more than 10 years, for more than a decade. They were the first soldiers to go in the punitive expedition with chasing Pancho Villa in Mexico. They were some of the first soldiers who then went to Europe with World War I. And then when they came back, they decided that, well, you know, Mexico, that Zimmerman telegram, that Mexico had kind of, there was some talk about them joining the side of Germany. The U.S. decided to build a fence. And that's what the headline of the paper says, a $7 million border fence between Mexico and the United States. And so in 1919, this camp was built. The adobe camp that you see today, it was one of 35. It's the only one still standing, mainly because it was of adobe. Most of the rest were of wood. The property that was the camp was built on belonged to the Newell family. John Newell had seen the opportunity in Naco because, well, the railroad crosses right over here to the side, and Naco was a major border crossing for the mines in Cananea, and he bought this thinking he could get a smelter here. Phelps Dodge built in Douglas instead, but he got the property back, and then after another interesting date this last week, August 3rd, marked the death of Warren Harding, our president. He died in San Francisco after a short illness. He had been part of the movement to build all of these border camps, but his replacement was a guy named Calvin Coolidge. And Calvin Coolidge was a kind of cool guy, and he said, we got to return to normal. And so he commissioned all of these border posts. So went back to the Newell family for a few years, 1924. 1935, it was released by the U.S. government as a Civilian Conservation Corps outpost. They did a lot of work around Bisbee. The golf course right down the street was a Civilian Conservation Corps project. They held on to it through World War II, through the 40s, but in the end of the 40s, the Newells moved back. And this became a key part of the community. It was called Newell's Camp at that point. And so for the next 40 years, the Newells and other members of the community lived here. A number of them are here in our audience today. And then finally, Mr. Newell passed away in the late 80s. Mrs. Newell decided that she was getting a little bit unable to care for this, and they decided to sell the camp. The camp was then purchased by Vision Quest. Vision Quest wasn't able to do what they wanted to do here, and so that's about when I got involved, late 90s. When I stumbled on this and was teaching for Cochise College, teaching elder hostel programs, later regular student classes, and I thought this would be a great historic place to bring my students. So I asked Vision Quest if I could. And they said, sure, but we also want to find somebody to take it on. We'll give it to someone who is willing to preserve it. And that started this journey. So 23 years later, we made it. 2006, we had a major arson fire that burned the junior officers' quarters over here. And at that point, Vision Quest said, we can't maintain this. We'll have to bulldoze it if we have to mitigate the asbestos. So I hit the ground running and talked to the mayor and managers council meeting right about then. And the mayor of Huachuca City stepped forward and said, we'll take it. We won't go into any of the reasons there, but they saved it. We were 4 days from when the decision had to be made. Because the fire had released asbestos, and the asbestos had to then be mitigated, all of the roofing materials, were part of that process. So Huachuca City took it on, and they were great stewards. And one big help we had, we applied for and received a Brownfields and EPA grant, and it was through Gabby Gifford's office and her aide, Gabe Zimmerman, that we were able to receive that funding. And she was a great advocate for us here. So, $400,000 later. All of the roofing you can see is no longer the asbestos shingles. We'll have to come up with a new idea for that. They also, we got a grant through the state to build a fence. But what you can see, well, the mayor got recalled and they were saying, what in the heck are we doing with this place 45 miles away? So I started putting pressure on Bisbee. I put a lot of pressure on Bisbee over the years. And in 2018, they agreed to take on the camp. Naco was not incorporated, so there was no entity in Naco that could take the camp. I always felt if I talked to the right person, the camp would be saved. It's such an amazing place. And that person turned out to be a professor from the University of Helen Erickson, who called me up and said, I've got students I want to assign to projects and where I'm assigning them to sites on the National Register. Her student came down and did a study. It turned into the story map. That's the little QR code on that bookmark if you got with your program. It won the state prize for an historic project for that year and brought us the attention of the State Historic Preservation Office, who encouraged us to apply for the 11 most endangered historic sites, and we got it. Steve Cochran and I, with the help of Bisbee, we were able to do that. Well, at that same time, we had applied for some small grants from the state from the rescue plan money, but that got the governor's attention. And so Governor Ducey's office got a hold of us and said, what do you really need? So we sent in a grant application, but he attached the master plan that we'd had done a few years before. And the bottom line on that master plan was $4.6 million. And that's the check they wrote. Well, at the same time, the Mellon Foundation chooses 2 organizations a year from the 11 most endangered to support. And they are very interested in African American history, diverse history, and this project caught their eye. And they said, well, this is the bottom line, write us a grant. And so once again, a lot of work later, $3.5 million. And so, as I sat here today, I had a hard time not crying as I watched the flags being presented, that this is going to come back to life. Thank you all for your support.
Becky mentioned the State Historic Preservation Office. I want to recognize Eric Bondi over in the corner over there from the State Historic Preservation Office. Thanks for coming, Eric. I almost cry every time you tell that story. I've heard it 1,000 times. Today at Camp Naco, we're initiating one of our community outreach programs called Descendant Stories. And this is an oral history project whose goal is to document as many of the stories around Camp Naco as we possibly can. Today we're honored to have 3 individuals to share their personal stories as descendants of Buffalo soldiers, or as one is a descendant of living here in Camp Naco itself after the time of the Buffalo soldiers. And I'd like to invite first Donna to come up to the stage, and then followed by Charles Young and Christine Rhodes. I told them 5 minutes because it's getting hot out
Good morning. I am Donna Jackson Houston, President and founder of the Nogales Buffalo Soldier Legacy Association. I am so honored to be here to share my family story with you. But first, who is familiar with Bob Marley's song, Buffalo Soldier? Who knew it was about the all-black soldiers? I love the song, but didn't really understand it until recently. Per the lyrics, the Buffalo Soldiers are fighting the war for America, fighting for survival, and it asks, if you know your history. Well, knowing one's history is vital and empowering. Although my family and I knew that my grandfather, Lucius Jackson Sr., served in the Army's 25th Infantry over 100 years ago, it was less than 2 years ago when we discovered he was a Buffalo Soldier. During the Mexican border wars, specifically the battle at Amos Nogales in 1918, Sergeant Jackson was stationed at Camp Little in Nogales, where he and his fellow soldiers secured and patrolled the United States border. The Buffalo Soldiers are considered the original Border Patrol. My family has a special connection with the border and Mexico. After my grandfather's service, he purchased a house that was literally on the United States-Mexico border, the last house on top of the hill in the street. Outside the backyard was the Border Patrol Road, and just yards away were our neighbors in Mexico. And at that time, there was not that large fence there to keep us apart. So there was conversation just like any other neighbor. It was wonderful. I had very fond memories of going across the border and still do. My family also has another special relationship with Mexico. My grandmother Angela Perez is from Sinaloa. Many of the Buffalo Soldiers who decide to reside in Nogales married Mexican natives and raised bilingual and bicultural families. Actually, a Buffalo Soldier who my grandfather was great friends with for many decades until they passed, was Levi Biggs. His granddaughter Michelle is here today, and she has been tremendous help to us with keeping the Buffalo Soldier legacy alive. Thank you, Michelle. In order to provide their children with a strong education, in 1928, my grandfather and other Buffalo Soldiers founded the Grand Avenue Frank Reed School for grades 1st through 8th. It closed in 1952 due to the desegregation in Arizona school system. A historical marker is at the former site on Grand Avenue. If you visit the Primera Alta Historical Museum in Nogales, there is an exhibit about the Buffalo Soldiers and their descendants. Many great students graduated from Grand Avenue. My uncle, John Jackson, was the first and only elected Black Afro-Mexican councilperson in Nogales. He also served as vice mayor. The Buffalo Soldiers were known as the all-Black soldiers. However, there were exceptions. Technically, there were non-Black Buffalo Soldiers. For example, in order to obtain U.S. citizenship, other minorities were assigned to the Black units. Pedro Mendoza was a Mexican national who served with my grandfather at Camp Little for this very reason. Is very proud of their Buffalo Soldier and has donated their family tree to Camp Naco to be on display. Descendants of the Mendoza family. One more exception. There's only one known documented woman Buffalo Soldier, Cathay Williams. In 1886, she enlisted as William Cathay and served for 2 years until being discovered as a woman during a hospital stay. In addition to the Buffalo Soldiers, many Black men and women served in other branches of the armed forces, also segregated. All of these segregated units paved the way for Executive Order 9981, which changed history 75 years ago by ending segregation in the military. The mission of the Nogales Buffalo Soldiers Legacy Association is to partner with schools and communities across the nation to educate, inform, and highlight the notable accomplishments of the Buffalo Soldiers who served patriotically while subjected to oppressive and discriminatory conditions. Although Arizona is my second home, I live in California. I am honored to collaborate with the NAACP Pomona Valley branch to advance our mission. Unfortunately, I and many others did not learn about the Buffalo Soldiers in school. Last year at the California Hawaii State Convention, the NAACP passed a resolution to include the Buffalo Soldiers in the educational curriculum. We are working with schools, organizations, and elected officials to make this happen. And this is exciting. Thank you for that applause. Lastly, the Buffalo Soldiers were a brotherhood. Many of them served at more than one base: Camp Ledo, Fort Huachuca, Camp Naco, and other locations in Arizona. Again, knowledge is powerful. Learning that my grandfather was a Buffalo Soldier was life-changing. My family is proud to have 5 generations of Lucius Jackson, from my Buffalo Soldier grandfather to my great-nephew, Lucius Jackson V, and hopefully keeping his namesake alive for many generations to come. I hope that my story has inspired you to learn more about the amazing legendary Buffalo Soldiers and history in general. I am so grateful for this journey and my extended Buffalo Soldier family. When you go home, speak with your families about members that served in the military decades ago. You too may discover you're a descendant of a Buffalo Soldier. We thank them and all of our military for their service to Arizona and American history. Thank you, and onward.
How's everybody doing this morning? Probably those under the shade are nice and cool there. My name is Charles Young, and I know it's a hard act to follow Ms. Jackson, but I'll do my best. Fortunately, my great-grandfather served in the 25th Infantry, but he was in Texas, in Brownsville, Texas. Around midnight on August the 13th, shots rang out on the road between Brownsville, Texas, and Fort Brown, which was an old Army garrison. 10 minutes later, a civilian who was a bartender and a law enforcement deputy sheriff was wounded. And as a result, the angry residents swarmed the streets, convinced their homes had been terrorized by the newly arrived soldiers. Inside Fort Brown, the alarm was sounded. My grandfather was on guard duty that night. And soldiers leaped from their bunks and grabbed their rifles, thinking they were under attack by the hostile townspeople. The soldiers were black, the civilians were white. Still proclaiming their innocence, 167 black infantrymen of the segregated 25th Infantry Regiment were summarily dismissed without honor or trial by President Theodore Roosevelt. And this is sort of a caveat, because I'm sure how many of us are familiar with Teddy Roosevelt charging up San Juan Hill? Well, did you know, unfortunately, it wasn't San Juan Hill. It was Kettle Hill. And if it had been for the Buffalo Soldiers, Teddy Roosevelt would have never gotten to be president, because he would have been killed. And so when he did that, a lot of the senators at the time confronted him and said, you know, how can you do this to these black soldiers? And they're the ones who saved your life, and you wouldn't have been president, because you would have been deceased. But he did it anyway, and what he did, he waited till after the election, because most African Americans at the time were Republicans, so he waited till after the election, then he discharged without honor. And that way he still got the votes that he needed to become president. And the gentleman that wrote the book was John D. Weaver, and he first published his book in 1970. And there was evidence between 1909 and 1910. There was a court of inquiry which they claimed to gather information. And I had the opportunity to go to Monroe, Georgia, where my great grandfather lived. And there they have a museum. If you ever go to Monroe, Georgia, there's a little museum there, and they have a section of the museum is honoring my great grandfather and his wife, who was a caterer in the area. And the case remained closed until 1971, when, after reading the Brownsville raid, Congressman Augustus F. Hawkins of Los Angeles introduced a bill to have the Defense Department rectify the justice. Amid a flurry of national publicity, honorable discharges were finally granted in 1972. They were all posthumously, except for Private Dorsey Willis, who was 87 years at the time, and he was given his honorable discharge. And also the reason that celebrating Buffalo Soldier Day is so important to me also, because I found out, like Miss Jackson, doing the research, that my cousin, John Conyers Jr., was the one that introduced legislation to Congress to have July the 28th honored as Buffalo Soldier Day.
Who would have ever predicted that these many decades later, I would have the honor and opportunity to share my childhood memories of living in a little paradise, then called Newell's Camp. John and Jenny Newell were the owners of the property at that time. Jenny and I became close friends. She made clothes for me on her treadle sewing machine that was situated in front of a window facing the Mule Mountains in the building now known as the old Camp Naco Hospital. That's where the Newell family lived. When my family and I resided in the beautiful adobe officers' quarters across the street, in the second house across the street, we were $40 a month renters and so proud of the family home with its summer landscaping, flowers. I was famous for the zinnias that I grew in front of the house here in Camp Naco. The screened-in front porch and the tadpoles that appeared every spring and summer in the puddles in front of the house. It was here we had our first telephone, party line, of course. We had our first electric refrigerator. We had an indoor washing machine. And the greatest of the newest technology, we had a television. Here I rode my bicycle, a 3-speed J.C. Higgins, up and down the streets of Camp Naco, or Newell's Camp as it was known then. And then I'd ride over to Main Street, now called Towner Avenue. The freedom that children had in those days was amazing. Freedom to explore the old barracks, freedom to visit the neighbors in the other officers' quarters, freedom to make lifelong friends, and freedom to imagine the past and just why these buildings came to be. I would like to thank you sincerely for listening to my short story, but a very heartfelt story. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I will be available to answer questions. But at this point, I just wanted to add that Charles Hancock, and some of you here know, that my grandfather went to Cuba. He was there at Kettle Hill with the Buffalo Soldiers. And prior to that, he went to the Philippines with the Buffalo Soldiers. So that's a story for another time. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Wow. There are so many stories. Perhaps you have a story about Camp Naco. It could be weird, it could be wonderful. But we're looking for stories about Camp Naco as part of our Descendant Stories project. So I'm going to point out, where is Juanetta? Where is one? There she is. If you have a story that you'd like to begin the process, we're doing some preliminary interviews. If you have a story about Camp Naco that you would like to share with us, contact Juanetta right here, and she will set you up. We have a video interview chamber in this building over here. We'll get your information, and then we'll contact you later for a longer extended interview when it's not so hot. But we would love to capture the names and the stories as possible as we can, so that we can begin to create a permanent archives of stories of the descendants of Camp Naco. So thank you to Christine, thank you Charles, and thank you Donna for those stories. So let me conclude the ceremonies by thanking those people who have made this event happen. First, I want to thank the City of Bisbee and their leadership and their staff for helping us out. I want to thank the Camp Naco team. It's Becky Orozco, it's Mark Costa, and Mike Norman. And I want to give a shout out to Mike Norman in particular. He did a Herculean effort to get this place not only ready for this event, but safe. So thank you to those guys. I want to thank our distinguished speakers today for sharing their time and their passion, their advocacy in honoring the Buffalo Soldiers and in honoring Camp Naco. I want to thank the American Legion for doing the color guard. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And gals, I really appreciate it. I want to thank Dan Pinda, who's over there in the corner, who gave us a live bugle today. This is not common. It's a live bugle today. I want to thank all of the participating Buffalo Soldier organizations and individuals. Again, they're listed in your program today. So I got to tell you, when I first took on this position, I was told that, a lot of my job is going to be about herding cats. So when I got to get to know some of the Buffalo Soldier organizations, oh, did that come true? These were cats to be herded, but I got to tell you, these were some of the coolest cats that I had the honor of being a part of. And I'll tell you, today would not have happened if it weren't for them. So thank you all so much for all your help in coming together and again, creating a unified voice of the Buffalo Soldiers. Part of it is that we want to create Camp Naco as a premier destination for the stories of Buffalo Soldiers. And these guys have really helped to make that happen. So finally, I want to thank you guys for enduring the heat today, for coming out and helping us celebrate. Just a couple of announcements. As you may have seen, this program is being video recorded. So if you're looking for, would like to see it again or would like to hear it again, we'll be sending that link out to those people who signed up at the welcome table. I also want to invite you to go out and see the exhibits in the Officers Club, which is right behind you here. There's some amazing exhibits. There's uniforms, Buffalo Soldier uniforms. There's archaeology. There's history here. I will also be there with some of our Project Vision to begin to talk about what we plan to do with the buildings and be happy to answer any questions and listen to all of you in terms of what we need. I also want to make you aware of an ongoing fundraising project for permanent flagpoles that are going to be established here to use these flags and put them permanently in the camp. So if you want more information about that or want to continue the donations, please see the welcome table for that. You have a program with a map on it. We welcome you to do some self-guided tours. If you see people in yellow shirts or people like me in a blue polo Camp Naco shirt, contact them for any questions that you might have. We can help you orient you to the rest of the facility. There are food trucks. There's an ice cream truck. So please take advantage of those, honor and patronize the mobile vendors that came out today. We really appreciate that. And finally, some safety reminders. First of all, stay hydrated. Drink water. Stay in the shade for as much as you possibly can. The Officers Club has a cooler in there, so if you get warm, please go in there and cool down. Camp Naco is a construction site. Okay, please be safe. Your safety is our #1 priority. Please honor the yellow caution tape that's here. It's there for a reason. It's for your safety. And finally, let me close the ceremony as I've begun a tradition to do, and Donna picked up on it, and I'm so glad that she has. We have a motto for our project, and it's onward. And onward was the motto of the 25th Infantry. And we want to honor that by continuing that effort and moving onward with this project and with your help to see this next 4 years of revitalizing this camp and doing it all together. So onward. Thank you all for coming.